Okay, we'd like to get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to the JPA meeting for ICTF. I'd also like to welcome everybody to my neighborhood and my community. So I hope you're enjoying it over here. It's an area that is affected by this, by the ICTF. So what I'd like to do is start by having roll call.
Here.
Here.
Here. She's on her way. Okay, I'd like to read an opening statement. Persons in the audience may address the board in connection with any agenda item or during the public comment period. As provided by the Brown Act, the board has limited each individual speaking time to 3 minutes. Anyone desiring to speak during the public comment period is requested to complete a speaker card and submit it to the secretary prior to the start of the meeting. So first up, we'd like to take public comment on non-agenda items. So if there's anybody here who wants to speak on something that is not on the agenda, I know ICTF is, so if there's anybody who wants to just make general public comments, I'd like to invite them up. Did we have any speaker cards for those?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have a number of speaker cards. Most of the speakers have requested to speak on item 5 on the agenda. Some, however, have expressed an item on item B, which is comments from the public on non-agenda items. I would defer to the board if you'd like to hold these off until the end. I'm not sure if some of the items, some of the speakers may actually wish to talk on item 5, but have. Okay.
Let me just invite anybody who's here to speak on something other than item 5. Okay, come up. Okay, seeing none. Okay, we will go to the next item. It's approval of the minutes. Has everybody read the minutes? Can I have a motion?
I will move minutes.
And I will second.
Okay, we have motion and second. Any comments on the minutes? Seeing none, we have motion second. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. The next is election of officers. We don't need to read the agenda item. I would like to nominate Cindy Muskowski for chair for the next year of the ICTF JPA. Is there a second?
All right.
Okay. We have motion and second. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
Let me, if I can now make a motion, I would like to nominate Nick Sramick as vice chairperson.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Okay. Have motion and second. Any comments? Have motion and second. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. That's it. 2 officers, correct? Right. Okay. Cindy,
All right. That then takes us to the items of discussion today in section E, and let us start the reports from the executive director, starting with item number
1. Is your microphone on? Yeah. Okay, try it now. Yeah, there you go. Good.
All right, we will hear the board reports from the executive director, and let's start with item number 1.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first item on the agenda is the financial audit for the fiscal year ending June 2009. The ICTF's auditor, Macias, Ginny, and O'Connell have completed the financial audit of the JPA for the fiscal year. The audit determined the financial position, changes in financial position, and cash flows are presented fairly. Just a little update on the audit. The operating revenues for the JPA decreased 29.2% in the reporting year to a $5,901,089. Net assets decreased 8.3% to $22,140,423. The decrease is largely due to the downturn in the global economy, and the container volumes in both ports during the reporting period decreased approximately 7%. And again, this is for the fiscal year ending in June 2009. This results it resulted in a net decrease to the ICTF gate moves in 23% downward for a total of 519,173 lifts. Just a comment on the audit, it's attached to your board packet. The recommendation is to receive and file the financial audit for the fiscal year ending June 2009.
Are there any questions on the audit as submitted? Or comments?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That item is approved. Next item?
Madam Chair, item number 2 is a net facility revenue report and agreed upon procedures for the annual period ending in November 1st, 2009. Again, Macias, Ginny, and O'Connell, the auditor for the ICTF, has reviewed the net revenues for the year ending in November 1st of 2009. During that period of time, there was a gross 444,809 container movements through the ICTF, generating a revenue of $13,344,270. This is a 42% decrease from the previous reporting period ending in November of 2008. Gate fees collected by the ICTF minus the allowable deductions resulted in a net revenue to the ICTF of $9,015,543. As prescribed in the ICTF JPA agreement, these revenues are to be shared equally between the railroad and the JPA. To that respect, $4,507,772 were transferred to the ICTF investment account, representing that 50% share. The final draft report of the net facility revenue report and agreed upon procedures is attached. The recommendation to the governing board is to receive and file the net draft facility revenue report for the year ending 2009.
Are there any questions or comments on this report?
Actually, I'd like to ask a question, just a kind of a general question on the container volume at ICTF. Has it picked back up recently with the pick back up at the 2 ports?
Yes, it has. We have some information that's not provided in the board packet for the current year, 2010. The volumes have increased. However, they have not increased as much as they have for the rest of the port facilities. And the reason for that is the railroads, and particularly in this case, Union Pacific Railroad, has done more on-dock rail activities. And so fewer containers are coming up to the ICTF in comparison to the overall port volumes. And that is, it's an interesting symptom. Although the ports, both ports in 2008, 2009 saw large decreases in their on-dock, in their total cargo volumes, the ICTF gate volumes dropped even more dramatically as the railroads consolidated and managed more train traffic in the on-dock facilities. And likewise, as the volumes have picked up, the recovery in the gate volumes at the ICTF have been slower to recover than we've seen on the on-dock facilities.
Okay. Thank you.
I had a similar question as we look at the audit report that we just approved, which the fiscal year ended in June, and then this is a net revenue report ending in November of 2009. The ICTF gate movement decrease in the audit report was 23%, but in the financial reporting period that we're looking at now, it was 42% decrease. So it was a significant increase in the decrease, or significantly fewer. In other words, they're not consistent. I don't know if that had to do only with the differential of one ending in June and one ending in November, so it got a worse impact of the last year's recession, or last year and a half. And then I think partly your answer that there's just been more efficiency in on-dock rail movement may also account for some of that discrepancy.
Yes, you're correct in both items.
And generally, going forward, as you answered Commissioner Ceramic, even though volumes might increase, we're not going to see a corresponding immediate correlation increase on the ICTF movement because of the on-dock rail still.
Yes, that's correct. As both ports have increased their on-dock rail facilities in the past few years, the railroads have also changed some of their operating procedures in the harbor area, consolidating more cargo onto the on-dock terminals. They've done that for a number of reasons: to reduce costs, improve efficiencies, and we will see some increases in the 2010 reporting period at the ICTF, but the jury's still out. I don't think we can predict quite yet what the performance will be, but our expectation is it would not mirror the cargo volume increases that we've seen at the rest of the port.
Thank you. Are there other questions on this item? Let the record reflect that we've been joined by Commissioner Geraldine Natz, and I believe that we are now ready for a motion on the item number 2, if there's a motion.
Motion to receive and file.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Next item. Item number 3.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item number 3 is a recommendation to adopt the budget for fiscal year 2010-2011. A copy of the budget is attached to the back of your board letter there. The proposed budget for fiscal 2010-2011 is $4.6 million. The largest percentage of the budget is $2.6 million that's being proposed to fund primarily the consulting services and legal services associated with Union Pacific Railroad's application to modernize the ICTF. These proposed funds and previous year funds expended would amount to approximately $4 million. This is the anticipated cost of preparing the EIR associated with the application for modernization. UP has agreed to reimburse the Joint Powers Authority for $4 million, for an amount not to exceed $4 million for these costs. Operating expenses for the JPA, such as audit fees for the previous audits that we've just reviewed, meeting expenses, miscellaneous expenses, are also reimbursable by the Union Pacific Railroad in the amount of not to exceed $100,000 annually. The budget for 2010 reflects an approximate amount of $24,100 to cover those costs. UP also advances funds and pays for the City of Carson maintenance fees, which are expected to increase to an amount of $108,538. And this is based on an increase in the Consumer Price Index, and that amount is reflected in the proposed budget. A large dollar amount of $1.9 million is also reserved to pay for the City of Carson impact fees for the improvements to Sepulveda Boulevard. This is a capital project that has been postponed a number of years while the City of Carson completes an environmental review of that project. We have been holding over this amount in previous years in case the City of Carson gets that project ready for underway to build the project. So we're recommending that the budget for this coming fiscal year include that $1.9 million. The overall proposed budget is, again, $4,609,207. We're recommending that the JPA approve the proposed budget for fiscal year 2010-2011.
Is there any question or discussion?
I just have one question. Doug, has the city of Carson given us any indication that that environmental review is forthcoming in this fiscal year, or is it simply a matter of us continuing to carry this budget item over from budget to budget in anticipation that at some point Carson will do the environmental review and we'll have these impact fees?
Yeah, it's the latter. We have not heard from them recently that they expect to get this done in 2011. So we will continue to hold this on the budget until such day they're prepared to go forward with those improvements.
And is the reason between the proposed budget being lower than last year's proposed adopted budget?
That's a good question. The previous year's budget anticipated a larger expense on the ICTF modernization EIR. The budgeted amount for the 2009-2010 period was approximately $2.25 million. The actual expenses on the project have been less than $600,000, and we attribute this to some of the delays in preparing the EIR. That will be a subject of discussion on agenda item 5, a little bit describing the current schedule, but we've pushed into the proposed budget for the subsequent year expenditures for that EIR.
Are there other questions or comments on the budget? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the budget?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That budget is approved. Next item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item number 4 is a recommendation to approve distribution of funds to the two JPA partners, the Port of Los Angeles and Port of Long Beach. The net revenue received from the Union Pacific for the reporting period is estimated to be $8.7 million. This exceeds the anticipated needs for fiscal 2010-2011. The agreement, as we discussed with the City of Carson, requires the JPA to contribute at some time in the future approximately $1.9 million for that improvement project on Sepulveda Boulevard. We're recommending holding those dollars in the fiscal budget, as we discussed previously. Additionally, we will recommend leaving a balance of approximately $2.7 million to be carried over into fiscal 2010-2011 to allow for cash flow associated with the EIR preparation. And that would leave a balance of $6 million, if approved by the JPA board, would be shared equally $3 million to each the Port of Los Angeles and Port of Long Beach. We're recommending at this time a distribution of funds be approved in the amount of $6 million to be shared equally by the two ports.
Are there any questions on this item and recommendation? Distribution of funds? If there are none, is there a motion to approve the recommendation?
I'll move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right, that is approved. Case is clear.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes the actions requested of the JPA staff to the board for this fiscal year. Item number 5 is a progress report, status report on the preparation of the Environmental Impact Report, or EIR, for the proposed modernization project. In the audience are members of the staff of both the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles. We also have adjacent to me Mr. Rick Cameron, who's the Director of Environmental Planning for the Port of Long Beach, and Ms. Lisa Oshner, who is the Project Manager. They are going to give a report. I believe there's also members in the audience from the Air Quality Management District who would be available to answer questions of the board. Should we turn it over to you now, Rick, or Lisa?
Is this on? Yes. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Lisa Oshner. I am with the Port of Los Angeles Environmental Management Division. I am also the project manager for the ICTF EIR as well as the SCIG EIR. Just a quick overview, JPA staff from both ports is overseeing the preparation of the environmental analysis. AQMD, otherwise known as the South Coast Air Quality Management District, is the primary consultant that is preparing the document. Since the last JPA board meeting, we have made considerable progress in the development of the draft environmental impact report. We have been working closely with the applicant, Union Pacific, to finalize the project description as well as all of the assumptions that supports the technical analysis that is currently underway. We are also spending time to ensure that both the ICTF environmental impact report is synchronized with the proposed BNSF SCIG project EIR, which is also undergoing an EIR process. With that, we are ensuring that the two documents are aligned for consistency, as well as to support a special combined cumulative assessment that we had discussed at the last board meeting, which would look at the combined impacts of both facilities in the areas of traffic, noise, and air quality, which we expect to have the greatest amount of impacts. Our goal is to complete the draft EIR by first quarter 2011. We expect that with both the SCIG and ICTF EIRs being done concurrently, that the two documents would be released at the same time or within a short time frame of each other. So with that, we would most likely consider an extended review period of up to 90 days. At the time of the draft EIR release, we will have extensive noticing of public outreach to indicate the release of the document, where it is available, the public review period. We will also hold a public hearing, which is required. At the time of the draft EIR, once we receive public comments, we would then work on finalizing the EIR, and we would expect to have that completed, or our goal rather is to have that completed by third quarter 2011. And that's just a brief overview. Rick, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
Can I ask a question? When you indicated that we might be looking at releasing the two EIR projects either concurrently or pretty close in time, and then you talked about holding a extended public comment period for both, and then a public hearing. Are you expecting that we would hold a joint public hearing on the two projects, or each appropriate agency holding a separate public hearing on each? Okay.
Right. We expect separate hearings because the BNSF SCIG project is under the Port of LA as the lead agency, and the ICTF EIR is under the JPA as the lead agency under CEQA.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. I'd like to just find out, how do you align them for consistency? Do you use the maximum capacity for each one, maximum planned capacity? How do you align the two?
Well, it just so happens that there are certain elements of the project that are similar. For instance, the capacity for both SCIG and ICTF are identical, which is 2.8 million TEUs each. So where there is overlap or similarities in the project description itself, we would obviously make note of that and make sure that the assumptions to support certain elements of the project that feed into the air analysis, the traffic analysis, the noise, are all consistent, that we use similar protocols and methodologies. I would say that is really the heart of where we're trying to align the two documents for consistency purposes.
Does that lead to a conclusion that it's very likely that since the ultimate capacity for each is pretty much the same, that whatever protocols will be developed in terms of mitigation, that likely that each project will have the sort of relatively the same group of mitigations?
They should. That is our goal. Just from an environmental impact standpoint, we would expect that mitigation that is developed by the two ports that the JPA would then consider and adopt at the time of the final EIR certification would be similar, as well as, I guess that's really where we would maintain the similar mitigations.
Yeah, well, each project, based upon the analysis and their individual locations, may have specific impacts that need to be addressed a little bit differently. And in that case, you might see a variation in the types of mitigation that would be applied to either one of the projects. I can't speak for the SCIG project per se, but that may be the case for the UP project here for the ICTF. But I think I would agree with Lisa. That exactly goes back to the Commissioner Schrammick's previous question about consistency. We've been trying to line up a lot of the standard mitigation measures, CAP measures, for instance, other mitigation measures that both ports have developed over the course of the last couple of years, and trying to be consistent with the use for those two projects. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I appreciate that they're being done relatively consistently for consistency's sake, because if they got out of sync, one project could sort of assume a group of mitigations and sort of use up available mitigation and leave the next project less able to meet what would be necessary to mitigate.
I would also add that I think it's important that as we get to a certain point of completing the analysis, specifically for this document, for the ICTF expanded UP project, that we would be having to sit with the applicant to discuss possibly some variations. I mean, there's a difference in operations. There may be a difference in how they want to attack a particular impact that may differ from the SCIG project and how maybe BN would want to attack it. And I think that is where I think staff is going to have to be very clear about what the impact is, what potential variations they may want to propose, and do the best that we can to document that and make it as clear as possible for the draft document and through the process.
Are there other questions?
Yeah, I got a question on who is the lead agency for the SCIG EIR?
It's the Port of Los Angeles.
Okay, so that allows you to really, with AQMD, really work with the two together, then combine the two. I was just curious I didn't realize that you're the lead agency for the SCIG EIR, because making sure those two work together could have been a real problem, issue.
And Lisa's done, Lisa with Ralph previously, but with Lisa over the course of the last 18 months or over a year, has done a great job with both those projects. It's been very challenging for her, but I think she's done a great job doing that so far.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions before we go into the public hearing? I have one, and I don't know whether or not it's a fair question, but in as much as you're working with, it's for ICTF, Union Pacific, and the City of LA is working through SCIG with the BNSF, are the two entities, although they are different in how they might operate, are they mostly approaching the EIR and the issues that are being set forth in terms of the basic EIR draft analysis pretty consistently, or is there a large variance between the two entities?
I would say overall the two are similar. With BNSF, we do meet more often and regularly, but that hasn't changed anything in terms of the progress or the development of the EIR. We do have meetings with Union Pacific. More recently this year, we've had quite a bit of meetings than what's been done in the past when the EIR process was started. But we do host face-to-face meetings, webinars, conference calls, all types of communication.
Okay, thank you for that report. I believe, unless there's any other questions at this time, we should probably move to the public hearing on this item, and I understand that that's what the majority of the people in the audience are here to talk to us about, so we'll open it up now to the public comment.
Yeah. Madam Chair, we have a number of speaker cards, and I would just ask anybody in the audience who wishes to speak who has not filled out one of these cards, please go back to the back table there, and there's a card. You can fill it out, and then it'll be brought up here to the front, and we're going to do these on the, recommend do these on the order of them being received. I'd also like to say that we have provided a translator tonight. In previous meetings, some of the speakers have spoken Spanish, and so we have a person in the audience. If you could raise your hand, our translator right here. Thank you, up in the front. And if a speaker needs assistance with translation, we'll make that available. Perhaps you'd like to say something to the audience in Espanol.
Buenas noches. Toda persona que desea aceptar comentario con la Junta Directiva y desea hacerlo en español, favor de pasar atrás para completar una tarjeta de hablador. Habrá un límite de 3 minutos. Entonces, si usted desea aceptar comentario, favor de pasar al escritorio atrás y apuntar su nombre y la materia de la cual usted desea hablar en la tarjeta de hablador o de poniente, digamos. Gracias.
So you're going to call the speakers?
Yes, the first comment is from Elena Rodriguez. And I would ask the speakers we're approximately 3 minutes is the time limit to provide time for the next speaker, please.
We got a problem.
Yeah, we do.
Still keeps rolling.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Elena Rodríguez y soy residente de aquí de West Long Beach. Gracias por permitirme estar aquí y decir mis preocupaciones acerca de la expansión del ICTF.
Good evening. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I'm a resident of West Long Beach. Thank you for allowing me to talk about my concerns about and to be here and talk about my concerns with respect to the ICTF expansion.
La existente,
He's got it.
Now he's got it.
la existente instalación ya está causando mucho daño a nuestros niños y a la comunidad en general, ya que está unida con varias escuelas, por ejemplo, Cabrillo, Hudson, Stevens y Webster, que en un total de alrededor de 7,000 estudiantes y muchos de ellos provenientes de diferentes áreas de Long Beach.
The existing facilities is already causing a lot of damage for our children and the community at large, which is also together with, it's close to several schools, such as Cabrillo, Hudson, Stevens, and Webster, which have a total of more than 7,000 students, many of them from other areas of Long Beach.
Y con un porcentaje muy alto con asma, todos estos niños.
And it's a very high percentage of asthma with these children.
Y estoy segura que fue un error muy grave el haber construido esta instalación. Por lo tanto, no cometan el mismo error y no construyan otra ni amplíen la que ya está.
I believe that it was a very grave mistake to have built this facility. And so I'm asking that you not commit the same sort of mistake, building once again a newer facility.
Por favor, sean inteligentes en el uso de tierra.
Please, be smart about using our lands around here.
Pienso que si el tren pertenece al puerto y debe de estar en el puerto.
I think that this train goes up to the port and it should be loaded at the port.
Y por lo tanto, lo que ya existe ahí, la autopista 103, sería bueno construirlo en un parque. Es lo que necesitamos, especialmente aquí en esas comunidades. No necesitamos industria.
And what you're going to be doing with the 103 highway, I think what would be best is to build a park there. That's what we really need in this community. We don't need to build any more industries.
No más enfermedades, no más contaminación, por favor.
Please, no more pollution and no more sickness.
Creo que si construyen esto, alguien que le hace daño a otra persona es porque le tiene odio. Entonces, por favor, no construyan esto.
The thing is that if you're willing to do harm to another person, then it's out of hate. So I'm asking, please, do not build this.
Porque esto nos hace mucho daño.
Because this does a lot of harm to us.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Monica Parilla. Right over here.
Hola, buenas tardes.
Hi, good evening.
Mi nombre es Mónica Parrilla.
My name is Monica Parilla.
Tengo viviendo aquí en Long Beach más de 9 años.
I've been living here in Long Beach more than 9 years.
Para mí es una preocupación el querer expandir más el CTA.
I'm very worried about the ICTA expanding more.
Más que nada porque a mí me gustaría que ustedes tomaran un poco de su tiempo y vinieran a ver realmente cómo vive la comunidad, en qué condiciones estamos viviendo.
I would like for you to take a moment and come and really see what sort of conditions the community is living in and what it's really like there.
Y yo creo que cuando vean eso, ustedes tomarán una muy mejor decisión en no querer expandir.
And I think that once you see this, you will make a much better decision in deciding not to expand.
Nosotros vivimos en una bomba de contaminación.
We live in a pollution bomb.
No nada más hablando del puerto, del aeropuerto, de los trenes.
And I'm not just talking about the port, but the airport, the train,
de los troques,
the trucks,
de la zona petrolera,
the refinery zone,
de las refinerías.
and the oil facilities.
Entonces, si tomamos consideración y si ustedes nos dicen a nosotros con todo gusto, nosotros podemos llevarlos a que ustedes vean todo el área en la contaminación que vivimos.
So if you'd like to, we would very much and very happily like to take you out and see, to have you see and take you there to see the conditions of air pollution and the pollution in which we live.
¿Creen que o piensan que con eso va a ser mejor tránsito y no es verdad? Va a haber más tráfico, va a haber más contaminación, más enfermedades.
And I think that you're going to see out there that with the expansion there'll be more traffic, there'll be more sickness.
Enfermedades. No nada más cáncer, sino yo creo que
Not just cancer.
hoy en la actualidad nosotros vivimos muy pésimamente, comemos lo peor.
You know, I think nowadays we're living in the worst conditions. We eat worse than before.
Y yo creo que lo mejor es que tomemos consideración y mejoren el puerto, que mejoren todo lo que hay ahorita.
And I think that what you should do is take into consideration, to consider bettering or improving the port and improving everything that's already there right now.
Porque no sabemos ni qué futuro les espera a los niños.
Because we don't know what sort of future will be waiting for our children.
De todos modos, queda abierta la invitación
No matter what, this invitation is extended and open to you.
y muchas gracias.
And thank you very much.
Bernice Benares. Bernice. Benares. Following her will be Yolanda Lopez.
Good evening. My name is Bernice Benares. I am a teacher at Cabrillo High School. I'm also part of the West Side Schools for Clean Air, which is a partnership between Cabrillo, Hudson, and Stevens in fighting for clean air for this community. I've worked at Cabrillo for 8 years now. I have asthma, and it's gotten worse since I've started working at Cabrillo. I've even been intubated, which means my airways swelled so much that a tube had to be put down my throat and a machine breathed for me until the swelling went down. Last October, a year ago, a student of mine, 17 years old, looking forward to graduating, died of an asthma attack. I'm asking that you look at your own numbers. A 15% risk of cancer. At Cabrillo, 4,000 students and faculty. That means 600 of us are likely to come down with cancer just from being in this area. I'm asking you to reconsider the way that you're modernizing, take advantage of on-dock rail, do not increase any more pollution in this area. People are dying, children are dying, and the longer people stay in this community, the sicker they're getting. The asthma rate for the nation is 10%. Here, the district is called District 1 because we're so close to the railroads and the ports. We have a 20% chance of asthma. So please reconsider. Thank you.
Yolanda Lopez, and following Ms. Lopez will be Erica Olvera.
Buenas noches. Mi nombre es Yolanda López.
Good evening. My name is Yolanda Lopez.
Vivo aquí en Long Beach,
I live here in Long Beach,
en el West. El proyecto
on the
que
West End.
Okay. El proyecto que ustedes quieren hacer realmente a nosotros nos va a afectar demasiado.
This project that you people want to do is really going to affect us too much.
Yo tengo una hija, ya es adulta, ella tiene asma.
I've got a daughter, she's an adult, and she already has asthma.
Ella, aún ya siendo adulta, ha llegado a emergencias por su falta de respiración.
Even as an adult, she's gone to emergency rooms for not being able to breathe.
Yo padecí, bueno, las dos padecimos mucho cuando ella fue niña, porque tuvo muchas crisis ella y en realidad yo no sabía que ella tenía asma hasta que una persona me dijo y fue cuando yo le puse más cuidado.
Before, both of us suffered a lot from this, and we didn't know at that time that it was asthma, not until a person told us about it. And that's when we began to take more care.
Muchas veces me llamaron de la escuela porque ella no podía respirar.
Many times they would call me from school because she wasn't able to breathe.
Llegó al grado de que en el primer año su maestra de lectura la quiso reprobar.
It got to such a point that in the first year, her reading teacher wanted to fail her.
Porque ella la ponían a leer y como no alcanzaba el aire, entonces no podía ella leer suficiente.
She would have her read, and since she wasn't able to get enough air in, she wasn't actually able to read.
Entonces, yo, de mi parte, me gustaría que los niños que hoy están creciendo, que tengan una mejor vida.
The thing is, the way I see it, and as far as I would like it to go, the children who are growing now, I would like them to be able to grow up and have a healthy life.
Que puedan jugar libremente en la calle, en los parques.
And that they could play freely on the streets, in the parks.
Porque ahora ni en su misma casa pueden estar ellos libres de la contaminación que entra por las ventanas, por las puertas.
Even in their own homes, they're not free to play as they wish or breathe because of the air pollution that comes into the windows or doors.
Entonces, yo les pido de favor, y creo que todas las mamás queremos eso, que tomemos conciencia.
And I would like to please ask you and that you consider, and I believe all of the moms here would wish the same,
Para hacer este proyecto que estoy segura que esto no nos va a beneficiar en nada.
I think that doing this project, it's not going to benefit us in any sense.
Gracias por escucharme.
Thank you for listening to me.
Following Erica Olvera is Maria Reyes.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Erika Olvera y soy residente de Long Beach. Tengo una hija con asma y esta noche estoy aquí porque no estoy de acuerdo con la expansión de ICTF.
Good evening. My name is Erica Olvera, and I'm a resident of Long Beach. I have a daughter with asthma. The reason I'm here is because I do not agree with the ICTF expansion.
Yo sé que esta noche los que están a favor están poniendo el proyecto muy bonito.
I know that tonight those who are in favor of this are making the project out to be very beautiful.
Pero en realidad sabe toda nuestra comunidad y nuestros hijos que esto lo único que va a parar es que vamos a tener más problemas en contaminación, en enfermedades.
But our community and children well know that the only thing that is going to come out of it is more pollution, more sickness.
Sí. Y claramente sabemos que cualquier cosa que nos digan no nos van a hacer cambiar de la forma en que pensamos.
Okay. And we know that whatever you say to us is not going to come, excuse me, may I ask you to repeat? Sí,
Todo lo que nos digan no va a ser no va a cambiar nada porque es nuestra forma de pensar.
And our way of thinking is that everything that you may say is not going to change our way of thinking about this.
Porque en realidad los que están sufriendo son nuestros hijos.
Because in reality, the ones who are suffering are our children.
Nuestra comunidad, nuestros abuelos, nuestros tíos.
Our community, our grandparents, our uncles and aunts.
Y pues no queda más que decir que realmente estamos aquí esta noche diciéndole que no estamos de acuerdo con su propuesta y que por favor.
And really what it is that we're here tonight to tell you that we are not in favor of the proposal, and please.
Por favor, espero que tomen una decisión y que todo lo que digan los del proyecto, que lo cumplan.
I'm asking you please to make the decision on the project and everything that you're saying about it, that you follow through with it.
Y les queremos pedir algo muy especial.
And we'd like to ask something very special of you.
Que en estas juntas que tenemos haya traducción en español.
Okay. That during these meetings there be Spanish language translation.
Le agradeceríamos si no fuera mucha molestia.
If it's not such a bother, we would be very thankful.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Following Erica is Maria Reyes, and following Maria Reyes is Jocelyn Vivar.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es María Reyes.
Hi, good evening. My name is Maria Reyes.
Pues a lo mejor ya parece muy repetitiva la canción, pero es necesario.
Well, it may seem that this song's getting a bit repetitive, but it's necessary.
Pues yo estoy aquí por la razón de este proyecto que.
Well, I'm here because of this project.
Sí, pues que ya estamos muy afectados por lo existente, por el tráfico, por el ruido, por las luces. Dicen que van a hacer un proyecto bueno, que van a evitar el ruido y eso, porque ahorita... Sorry.
The thing is that what's already existing is very problematic, especially with traffic, noise, lighting.
Yo vivo muy cerca de las yardas ferrocarrileras y la yarda.
I live very close to the yard and the railroad.
Y hay veces que yo he escuchado las locomotoras, no sé si es necesario un aviso o como una alarma que usan, pero está haciendo sonidos, está pitando la locomotora.
The thing is that I hear the locomotives. I don't know if it's something that they have to do, it's an alarm, they'll be hitting the horn.
A veces 1, 2:30 de la mañana.
Sometimes at 1 or 2:30 in the morning.
Yo digo que si pueden considerar usar, si esto es como un aviso, si pueden tomar en cuenta y usar otra forma de comunicarse o decir ya llegué.
If this is some sort of a warning that must be done, I'm asking that you consider using some other sort of thing, use something else that says, I'm here or I arrived.
Porque esto sí molesta al vecindario.
Because this does bother the neighborhood.
Además, en este proyecto yo pienso que no se debe de mirar que ellos van a ganar o van a mejorar su economía.
Also, I want that in this project you not see so much that you're going to make money out of this, that the economy is going to be improved.
Quisiera saber en realidad, de verdad, cuánto les interesa el bienestar de la comunidad.
I really want to know how interested you are in the well-being of the community.
Y me gustaría mucho saber que si salen ganando ustedes, también la comunidad saliera ganando.
And I would like very much to know that if you guys come out doing well in this, if also the community would come out a winner.
Porque es triste en realidad de veras ver que les espere un futuro tan deplorable y tan de mala calidad a nuestras próximas generaciones.
Because it's very sad to sit there and see that the following generations are looking at a very deplorable and very difficult future.
Y de verdad, muy amablemente les pido que se tomen el tiempo en considerar la nueva tecnología, tantas cosas avanzadas que hay ahora en la ciencia, y si quisiera.
I would also like you guys to consider the new technologies that are coming out, all of the different advances.
Porque ya tenemos demasiado con riesgos de cáncer, asma y muertes prematuras.
Because we have too much cancer, premature death, problems with breathing.
En este proyecto nomás lo que quiero que todos seamos ganadores.
And I'd like to respectfully ask that in this project all of us come out winners.
Y tener una mejor calidad de vida porque yo
and have a better quality of life.
Sí, porque yo siento que los más afectados somos las minorías. ¿Cómo no nos
I believe that those who are most affected are the minorities.
¿Cómo no decimos, es que le vamos a poner una yarda ferrocarrilera o le vamos a pasar el tren muy cerca de mí o otras escuelas, por ejemplo?
Because it, for example, it just comes out saying like, I'm going to put in a railroad yard very close to where I live, or tracks or trains nearby the schools.
Pues es todo y les agradezco su tiempo. Gracias.
Well, that's it, and I'm thankful for the time you've given me.
Madam Chair, we have approximately 8 more speaker cards. One of the previous speakers requested that the proceedings of the board meeting be provided in Spanish. At a subsequent meeting, at the board's discretion, it could be made available for live translation with headphones for citizens that would like to hear the proceedings in Spanish be made available. We could make that opportunity available at the next regular scheduled ICTF meeting.
I think that would be worthwhile. You have the equipment capability.
The next speaker is Jocelyn Vivar.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jocelyn Vivar, and I'm with East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice, and we're a community-based organization in the City of Commerce in Southeast LA, but we're also organizing in West Long Beach. And I'm here today to speak with you on behalf of this community. Specifically, members of Commerce have experienced living for many years with rail yards in their backyards. And I can tell you that this community has experienced the impacts to their health and quality of life from the impacts of these rail yards on a daily basis. So personally, we know that impacts from rail yard activity weigh heavily on the surrounding environmental justice communities, where socioeconomic, environmental, and health factors combine to create a very harmful effect on the most vulnerable populations. From personal experience, we can tell you that having these two land uses, industrial rail yards and residential, in such close proximity to each other is very poor land use planning. The existing ICTF facility is already causing very harmful effects on the people that live there, and the effects go beyond 1,000 feet. The proposed ICTF expansion will be moving these effects closer to where people live. To some of them, it's right in their backyards. And that's very dangerous for kids to grow up in such conditions. And there are many sensitive receptors already in close proximity to the operations of these rail yards, but expanding it would also increase the effects to all these sensitive receptors, such as elementary schools, parks, churches, and daycare centers. But in April of 2005, the California Air Resources Board published the Air Quality and Land Use Handbook, which further emphasizes that sensitive receptors and certain polluting facilities, such as rail yards, should not be within 100 feet from each other. This yard should not have been built here in the first place, and it is very irresponsible to continue with plans to expand this yard and build a new one that will further exacerbate poor health conditions already faced by these families and increase the risk of cancer and other health ailments. We ask that as you hear these public comments, which we take time out of our schedule to come here and testify, that you take them seriously. People here face these issues, and we know that you understand these, but make a motion, do some sort of action to let us know that you're paying attention. Make a motion so that these projects will not proceed until they decide to clean up the other yards before deciding to expand or build a new one. A risk of 5 in a million is not acceptable, but if these yards are not willing to meet these, we ask that you don't consider them for adoption. Thank you.
The next speaker is Gilbert Gallagher, and following Mr. Gallagher is John Cross.
Hold it, or we just speak?
I hold it, I think it's...
Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman, and Commissioners, I am Gilbert Gallagher. We are part of UTR Plus. We build yard goats that run on propane. The older yard goats that run on propane are gas injected. We are liquid injection. What's the benefits of such a thing? 0 PM, 0 SOx, and NOx at 0.14. The reason that I'm bringing this up is because that freeway that ends on Willow is bordered by the 7 schools plus the military Cribillo village. It's an interesting thing that we send our soldiers off to war, and when they come back, if they didn't die there, come and live in Cabrera and you'll surely die there. The problem that I see is that I'm different from the other ladies that are here. They want to stop the project. I think that we can coexist. The board, or at least in 2008, Union Pacific asked for help in cutting the pollution. And to the wonderment, the boards of the Los Angeles and Long Beach ports set standards that at the time had no ability to be met. The technology wasn't there. So part of this request is that you, the board here, commissioners, set a similar standard. And then the genius of the United States and business can come forward and come up with these innovative ideas that can cut these pollutions, and we can coexist. We can have the economic activity that we need to be able to get a job and take care of our families, and yet be able to breathe the air that we are in. So as an aside, the Port of Long Beach gave $5 million to the schools to cut pollution or the effects of pollution that were created by the Middle Harbor. The most polluted areas, these 7 schools, with pollution levels that are at least 10 times more than any other in the whole of Long Beach. And a rhetorical question, how much money went to those 7 schools? So what I'm asking the board is, the board understands where the traffic is that's producing the pollution, and the board has money. Before you divide it up and give it to the cities and to the ports, consider using that money to mitigate the pollution that is created. And so again, if I can reiterate, that you set the standards and demand that those that use your facilities.
Hello, my name is John Cross. I'd like to welcome the commissioners and the directors of the port to West Long Beach again. I'm currently the vice president of the West Long Beach Neighborhood Association, and I'm representing the neighborhood association on the west side, which encompasses North City limits, Anaheim Street, West City limits over to the 710 freeway. And that area is known as the diesel death zone. And that's called in Sacramento. That's because we got the ports to the south, which you guys are doing an outstanding job of cleaning them up, by the way. You keep up the good work on that. And 405 on the north, 710 on the east. But we have refineries and a rail yard to the west of us. And they're some of the biggest polluters. Now, the refineries are being cleaned up because they're a stationary source. The AQMD, you can see them, smog levels going down. Now, a lot of the ladies prior to me and the gentleman prior to me made comments that West Long Beach has some of the dirtiest air in the state, which is true. That's why they call us a diesel death zone. Part of my problem is, why would you even consider letting UP expand when a UP representative made a comment? If you don't let us expand, we can't clean up the mess we got now, and you'll live with it for the next 25 years. That comment was made at a public meeting, and I can bring witnesses up to bring that, to tell you that. So that's the kind of neighbor we got. Live with it for 25 years or let us expand. That's not the kind of neighbor I want. There's 7 schools within a mile of that location. And I'm glad you're tying the EIRs together with the BNSF and the ICTF terminals together, because the growth in truck traffic coming through that area is going to be outstanding. I mean, just unbelievable. Even if you use ICTF's number of 1.5, or not a BNSF skid project, 1.5 million trucks a year lifts out of that project area. Even if they're clean trucks, that's equivalent to 300,000 trucks worth of pollution in a year's time. 300,000 if they're 80% cleaner. Well, there's not 300,000 trucks going in that area right now. I know that because I see them. At one time, the Asthma Foundation in Long Beach was counting 600 trucks an hour going down right past Hudson, Cabrillo, and Mary Bethune School. 600 trucks an hour, and they've got the numbers. Now, I got a question for staff, if staff can answer a question. Are we still using 10 in a million as a number?
That is correct. That's the standard that's been adopted.
Is that for both projects or together, or is that for each project?
For UP in this project, yes, and for BN, yes.
And for people in the audience that don't know what 10 in a million is, that means 10 deaths in a million is acceptable loss. 10 deaths in a million. A little while ago, there was a young man sitting here. I wish he was still here. I'd like for him to stand up Suppose he was at 10 in a million. Would you want him to be one of them? Or how about Mr. Ceramic here, who happens to live close to the rail yard? Or how about Rick, who happens to be an environmentalist? He could be one of those 10 in a million. I wouldn't want to be one of 10 in a million. As far as I'm concerned, one loss is not acceptable. And if you think there's no smog problem over here, let me tell you what. We got a family in my neighborhood that's 4 generations. They live in 3 different houses. The mom and dad never had asthma. The kids never had asthma. The grandkids never had asthma. All 4 great-grandkids have asthma, and they live within a 3/4 of a mile of the rail yard right now, the existing facility, ICTF. 3/4 of a mile. Now, you telling me that they're going to be good neighbors if they clean up their act? They can't even clean up the yard they got now, and they won't do it unless they get to expand. I've had rail yard officials corner them, ask them in a meeting, would you live next door to your rail yard? No. Rail yard officials will not live next door to their rail yard. So just remember, 10 in a million is not acceptable loss for anybody, especially if your son, your daughter, your mom or dad. You know, I got a congestive heart failure. I wrote it off as hereditary, but I lived here. Maybe it's a railroad caused my problem, I don't know. But 10 deaths in a million is not acceptable loss. Building one rail yard next to, within a mile of 7 schools, or expanding one within a mile of 7 schools, is not acceptable. And I don't think it's acceptable to anybody in this West Side Long Beach area. Now, a rail official asked me one time, what would it cost to make you guys happy? I said, give everybody in West Side $1 million for the home. They said, that's ridiculous. I said, so's building your rail yard there. Well, why don't you move, he asked me. I said, hey, you're moving into my neighborhood, I'm not moving into yours. Stay out of my neighborhood and keep it clean. Thank you.
Following Andy Harico is Joan Greenwood.
Hello, directors and commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Andrea Ricco, and I'm a professor of preventive medicine at the Keck School of Medicine of USC. It was exactly 5 years ago in this hall that hundreds of West Long Beach, Wilmington, and Carson residents turned out for the NOP hearing on the proposed BNSF SCIG project. Around that same time was when Union Pacific announced that it also wanted to expand its yard. Between 2005 and 2010, to your credit, the 2 ports have enacted a CAP, a Clean Air Action Plan, and each of you a different version of a Clean Trucks program. But to my knowledge, inside the ICTF rail yard, the ports have taken no action at all to reduce the high diesel cancer risks that are faced by residents and nearby school children, as documented by the AQMD measurements of actual pollution and CARB measurements that are modeling. And the ports have had 5 full years to figure out how to build enough on-dock rail so that the ICTF expansion and the BNSF SCIG do not have to go forward. For those in the audience who don't fully understand, the ICTF is located on land that's owned by the Port of Los Angeles. Both ports control the ICTF. In 1986, the Port of Los Angeles signed a 50-year lease with Southern Pacific, which is now Union Pacific. In 1986, the port said that no air pollution problems were anticipated, so no air pollution mitigation measures were demanded when the EIR was done in 1986. Some 20 years later, the California Air Resources Board determined that the diesel cancer risk near the ICTF is among the highest of the state's 18 rail yards. Now a new environmental review is underway for a larger ICTF, and now the railroads are asking that the 10 in a million cancer risk in the Joint Ports Clean Air Action Plan be relaxed. I urge you not to relax those standards and to stick with protecting public health. Meanwhile, USC and UCLA researchers show that living near mobile sources of air pollution and going to school near mobile sources of air pollution are being found to have many more health effects than we first thought. Certainly air pollution, traffic-related air pollution is causing asthma, is related to asthma exacerbations, reduced lung function. But now we also, not necessarily at USC, but other studies being done around the world, we are seeing studies linking traffic-related pollution and heart disease, traffic-related pollution and diabetes, and just last week, traffic-related pollution and breast cancer. So people who are living close to busy roads and freeways and other sources, mobile sources of exposure, of emissions, are developing these diseases. So I urge the ports to do something to reduce the current existing air pollution problem at this rail yard, and to consider all the latest science that shows that it is a very unwise land use decision to site a rail yard next to schools and homes. Thank you.
After Joan Greenwood is Isela Ramirez.
Good evening. My name is Joan Greenwood. I live in the Wrigley District of Long Beach. I am the Vice President of the Wrigley Area Neighborhood Alliance. I have been following the air quality issues related to the goods movement industry probably since 1997, and I have lived in Wrigley since 1986. By training, I'm an analytical chemist, and one of the things that motivated me to go back to school was learning that an environmental impact report does not protect you from adverse environmental impacts. And one of the reasons for it, of course, has been the changes that have occurred at the port and looking at mitigation strategies. And I will tell you, every study done of EIRs shows that in general, mitigation is the weak link. Now, I've heard about zero emission trucks. Last Friday, I attended a workshop at UCLA. It was entitled EV 101, and I spoke to several of the presenters about the status of these zero emission trucks. One, they're not here yet, and two, if they're heavy duty use for cargo, they're going to be very, very, very expensive to run. Now, in the past, when I've talked to the rail yard people about, again, these are executives, non-scientists, they say, oh, we can't control the trucks coming into the rail yard. So there is no guarantee to the community that clean trucks will go in. I also want to address this 10 in a million risk. Water Board doesn't accept that for an old gas station. Has anyone here looked at LAUSD requirements for school sites in terms of import soil to be used on these school sites? They make the ports look lenient. And again, I want to get back to risk. This is a risk factor. Knowledge of chemistry shows that a single exposure may trigger lung cancer later in life. We really don't know. These risk assessments are used to evaluate one scenario against another. They are very, very oversimplified models of reality. But again, I want you to bear in mind, you do not know the impacts realistically of what can happen with these exposures. Second of all, many of the chemical constituents that have been released over this past year, they're hanging around. The polyaromatic hydrocarbons, which are the worst carcinogens, do not readily decompose in the environment. So they're still flying around, mixing with current emissions. We know that because from doing surface analysis of soils, we find them everywhere in this basin. The second thing is, I believe at the previous meeting, I presented you with some recent studies of nanoparticulates. This science is really just coming to the forefront now that nanotechnology and concerns about worker safety have inspired scientists to go back and start looking. The nanoparticles were not taken into consideration when the risk assessment models were developed way back in the 80s. So you're not even using a model anymore that really is current and giving you a true picture. The railroads could have done a lot many, many years ago. They've known about the problem, and yet they've taken no action, and they've asked for expansion. The point is, it's incompatible land use. There is nothing that can be done to adequately mitigate it. You can simply approve a project which never should happen. Thank you.
We have 4 more speakers, and I'd like to remind the the speakers to please limit their comments to 3 minutes. Thank you. Isela Ramirez, followed by Jim Larson.
Good evening. My name is Isela Ramirez, and I'm also with East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice. We're concerned with this expansion proposal because we believe that there's sufficient data available that demonstrates the dangers of rail yard operations, especially when these rail yard operations are adjacent to neighborhoods and schools. In 2007, California Air Resources Board completed their health risk assessment for 18 rail yards in California. And the Union Pacific ITCF was one of these rail yards which was evaluated for health impacts associated with toxic air contaminants in and around the yards. And the areas adjacent to the yards are dealing currently with gravely elevated cancer risks that are associated with diesel PM emissions at the ITCF. Some risks are as high as 500 chances in a million, 250 chances in a million, and 100 chances in a million as per CARB. Currently, through the HRAs, we know that residents east of the rail yards, otherwise known as where we're standing, have an elevated cancer risk of 500 chances in a million or higher. This encompasses an estimated area of about 220 acres, where an estimated 1,200 people are exposed to diesel toxic emissions. About 10,000 residents are exposed to an estimated cancer risk from 250 to 500 chances in a million, within an estimated 730 acres around the rail yard. To consider expanding this existing toxic rail yard is to consider moving up the date to premature deaths for many of the local residents. It just doesn't make sense to expand a rail yard that is already dangerously close to schools, parks, and residents. In fact, Union Pacific has plenty of cleaning up to do in their current operations at the ITCF, but also in their Commerce Intermodal facility. How they can pose cancer risks as high as 500 in a million to several communities across the state and still intend on multiplying their capacity, that's not just greedy, but it's also irresponsible. And I grew up in the city of Commerce, and I drive past 2 rail yards, in particular the Union Pacific Commerce Rail Yard, every single day. I play baseball with my family just on the other side of the fence in Bandini Park, and I know what it's like to see a family member impacted with aggressive cancer. We just need to be more efficient with rail, and we have to focus on expanding rail infrastructure within the port complex and not outside of it, where our communities live. And just to close, I wanted to say that when I say efficient, I don't mean add more trucks, add more locomotives, but efficient in reducing the amount of deaths that we have every single year because of the rail yard operations. Thank you.
The next speaker is Jim Larson. Following Jim Larson is Tony Rivera.
Good evening. My name is James Larson. I am a homeowner on the west side. I've owned my residence since 1989. I have spoken before this board 4 or 5 times now, and while I find you all very nice company and very charming, I grow weary of this process. We've heard people say tonight that they would like to see you do a motion. They would like to see something out of this board, some indication that you're listening. And while I understand this process, and the process is that you're a fact finder, and that you're not supposed to engage in discourse, you know, it's been 5 years. So, you know, it's natural human, you know, feelings here that maybe we're not being listened to. Maybe this is just some hearing to fulfill litigation that we have a public hearing. But, you know, because my views basically haven't changed in the last 5 years. I still oppose this project. I oppose the expansion of the ICTF, and I oppose a new yard by Burlington Northern. I feel that the present traffic does not warrant expansion. I feel that there's a 23% reduction in the ICTF traffic. It's not matching what's coming into the port, because that's starting to increase again now. But, you know, lo and behold, there's on-dock loading going on. And that's been increasing, and that's what we want to see more of. And what we feel is that this is public property. the yard, and there are decisions by this board to be made on what is the necessary mitigation if this project goes forward. And two, is this really the proper use of this public land? Do we want to lock ourselves into a procedure or a process that we can't get out of for the next 25 years? In a long-term lease, in doing this type of thing, when there is new technology coming down the road and that on-dock loading is going to be a reality, and that the space available at the port is going to be adequate with proper planning. So, I would like this board to do something. And because here we are, 5 years later, a lot of money has been spent on your salaries, on having these hearings, of going through this process, and we don't know what's going on. I talk, is anyone listening? That's just a natural, you would feel the same way if you were in my shoes. Anybody would. And I don't really blame you, because I understand that your role, but it's a bad role. It's a bad spot to be in. So I would just like to emphasize that, the economic, technology, everything goes towards loading it on the port, rolling it out, then moving it in the directions it needs to go. But to do it 5 miles in a residential area from the port makes no sense whatsoever unless you own a truck, or unless you belong to the labor union for the railroad, or someone that has a interest in it from that standpoint. And I won't belabor the health risks, because that's been well documented and well stated. But believe me, as a long-term resident, the soot in the crap keeps falling. It keeps falling, and I keep cleaning it up. Thank you.
Following Tony Rivera will be Jesse Marquez, our last speaker of the evening.
Good evening. My name is Tony Rivera, chair from the West PAC, which is located on south of Pacific Coast and north of Anaheim, Long Beach Freeway, and Terminal Island Freeway. One of the things I've been hearing today is well done for the health risk and all that, but I want to emphasize, as a businessman in this area and resident in Bell Gardens, I want to say something. I feel sorry for the people who live next to the rail tracks here, ICTF, because I live next to Randolph. And for some reason, the rail now started stocking those rail cars over there, and at midnight or at 2 o'clock in the morning, they come and pick them up. And I wake up and I think that I'm in Long Beach or I have an earthquake coming, because it's so hard the way the noise is coming in. So that's one thing I want to mention. But back on this area, the traffic that is going to be with all these containers increase on the west side, and for that matter, the whole Long Beach will be stopped. We already noticed it because we live in it with. I'm not going to play with numbers and trying to be scientific about it. I just live in it every day. And here on the west side, every time we want to go out on the business, it used to be 15 minutes to get out of this area to go downtown. Now it's taking sometimes an hour. And that's if an accident doesn't happen. So I just want to make sure that also for the kids, the PCH, we have a lot of kids in PCH that take the bus. I would recommend that the Port Authority takes a really hard look on overall going out for this rail, the route from the port, and going out all the way to the desert. If you're not, I will say this to you tonight, you're not doing your job. Because before, we was talking about more like a on-dock rail. But at this time, the way everything is going and the way people are lying, and I tell you, I'm a little familiar with the trucking. The UP right now is staging containers on yards, sending clean trucks, and then move it with dirty yards, with dirty trucks from that yard. You go to 60 freeway, take notes of the containers, and you will see the way they're operating. So we can't trust them. The same thing in Long Beach. You see Long Beach freeway, they coming in with vans now, coming in from other areas, coming into this facility, ICTF. I would recommend for you to take and have your staff just do the whole study for the whole areas where they have the chance to manipulate these numbers and manipulate these deliveries. Otherwise, we will be spinning back. I happened to go through the Alameda corridor, which I thought was another wasting money from our taxes. Only I see is 25, 30 locomotives over there, and sometimes running, but I don't see the Union Pacific or whoever is the company with those stocks that the poor in Long Beach is trying to do something, even if it's not working, but at least they have the intentions to alleviate the problem, to eliminate those smoke that's going out to people, cars, and for that matter, coming to Long Beach when it's windy. So I will really emphasize for everybody to really put your 2 cents. The growth of this ICTF at this time is not warranted. The opening of the other company is not warranted unless you do a very good study all the way out and try to find another way to do it efficiently where you're going to affect this neighborhood, including mine, because I live 50 miles away. Thank you.
Good morning, board members and commissioners. My name is Jesse Marquez. I am Executive Director, Coalition for a Safe Environment. So I'll be speaking on behalf of our members in Long Beach, Carson, and Wilmington, and along the transportation corridor. And these comments will also be said on my behalf as an individual resident of Wilmington. We have made many comments in the past during the NOP stage, and I'm going to repeat some of those. And the reason I'm going to repeat some of these requests and some of these comments is because we want no excuse when you release the draft EIR that they were not brought up in the past. We asked you before that we want a health impact assessment to be included in this environmental impact report. We want no excuse it cannot be done. We want no excuse that it's not a valid health instrument. The only excuse right now is the sorry excuse for a health risk assessment. And the reason I'm saying that is because the health risk assessment done for this terminal was not based on one single fact of public health on this community. Not one. A health risk assessment cannot tell you how many people are sick with asthma. It cannot tell you how many people died of asthma. It cannot tell you how many people have COPD. It cannot tell you how many people died of COPD. It is based on a model that was a statewide model that has almost no relevance to this specific community. A health risk assessment is a comprehensive health assessment that is based on a public health baseline. That baseline can be based on a public health survey so that you know who is sick with what. So when you determine what is appropriate mitigation or appropriate technology, it is based on facts, and you do not have those facts right now. And so we're requesting again that that be included in this health risk assessment. Both UC Berkeley, UCLA have institutes for health impact assessments, and then there's also the health impact partners who are also consultants specialized in this. And I've read hundreds of your reports where you've spent anywhere from $500,000 to millions on your consultants, and therefore we, the public, ask you to do the same investment in this type of study as well. We want the project to include an assessment as to what it would take to have 50% of all trucks to be zero emissions. Balcom Corporation has electric trucks operating right now. Vision Motor Corps has zero emission hydrogen gas fuel cell trucks operating right now. You say you have no authority. I want you to show us what section of law that prevents you from requiring zero emission trucks. I want you to show me what section of law says that you cannot use a zero-emission transportation system such as a maglev train, electric train. Show us those section of laws that you're claiming you cannot do certain things that we are asking. We also ask that you look and assess alternative sites. We do not want you to do something such as what the Port of LA did not too long ago in one of their EIRs, where they did and looked at 14 different alternatives. They did not look at one of the public requested alternatives. So some of the alternatives we want to be done that we brought up last time, the Port of Long Beach has the Toyota Logistics Import Car Terminal. We stated before you could build multi-story car parking lots and not take up the land space, so you can put an intermodal facility there. We ask that you also do an assessment. How much of an increase would it require all the different terminals to increase the usage of the Alameda Corridor? Would it take so they would not have to do this? We want to see that figure in here as well. We also want to see an assessment that the different terminals that will feed into this terminal, are they in fact using on-dock rail? But we don't want an excuse. We want to have on-dock rail that is built dockside to the ship. Don't fool the public, because we're not fooled when you're telling us on-dock is okay, when all you're doing is still taking the container off the ship, dropping it onto the land, has to be picked up and moved at least 2 times. We want to see on-dock rail where the train goes right to the ship and can be unloaded directly onto the ship. So we want to see an assessment study that assesses that possibility. We want to make sure that all homes, sensitive receptors, public schools, anybody within 1 mile will have air purification systems and soundproofing of their homes installed. We want the soundproofing to be with an STC rating of 80 and above, which means it's soundproof. Do not even propose, don't even write it down that you're going to recommend and propose double pane windows. They only have an STC rating of about 30 to 35. I'd pay $30,000 from a house to do it and found out it's a joke. It does not work. We need it to be an STC rating of 80 and above. You state and you have voted and decided that 10 in a million is an acceptable death rate for the public. It is not acceptable to us. We are the public. It's our family, friends, and children that will be the ones that could die from this proposed project and its expansion. We want to see an assessment study that shows what would it take to achieve 0 deaths. Don't tell us to accept 10 in a million. We want to know what does it take to achieve 0 in a million. You tell us that first, because that cost may not be all that high. Also, both the South Coast Air Quality Management District and the California Air Resources Board has put together and published and released land use guidelines. And in those land use guidelines, it states what are considered the protective buffers zones for the public. You're not complying with it. So here we have 2 government agencies telling you right off the cuff that there are buffer zones that have been determined. In addition to that, there have been other scientific studies that are telling us that there needs to be a larger buffer zone distance. We want those studies to be part of the record. Also, we want to make sure that you do a light pollution assessment in the EIR as well. Thank you.
Madam Chair and members of the board, that concludes the public speaking portion of the evening. There are no other additional speakers. I'd recommend that the board adjourn the meeting for this evening.
All right. Are there any comments? As was indicated, this was only a progress and status report, so there is nothing before us to act on. I can appreciate that folks who've been coming for 5 years or more without yet something substantive before us to act on, but I think we did hear that the likelihood that a draft EIR will be released in the first quarter of next year, which if we stay true to that schedule will make our next meeting a very, very potent one. And I think we did hear that the staff can provide translation capability at our next meeting, and I think there's probably consensus of the board to ask for that, and so if we can make that happen.
We'll take care of it.
Yes, Mr. Sherman?
I'd like to ask probably Tom or Doug if you could explain the process that entity has to go through when they get an application for a project like this, that you have to go through the application, the EIR, and then a project approval or denial. I like just explain that, because people are saying we've been 5 years and we haven't made a decision, and why we haven't made a decision yet. If you could just explain that.
Well, before you can make a decision, which is to approve, say, for example, an amendment to the sublease that you have with UP or an agreement with the Port of Los Angeles, that is an action that is subject to an environmental assessment and a certification of an environmental document. So you need to go through that process first before and certify that environmental document before you can go forward and approve the necessary lease and other agreements that you're going to have to do to implement this project with UP if you were to go that way. So what we're doing right now, as was explained to you earlier, is to go through drafts of the environmental document, and there have been explanations as to why there have been delays in that. Until you get that document in front of you, there's no legal action that you can take with respect to this project.
Thank you very much. The other question I have is on the 10 in a million. Where did that number come up, and how are we, and Geraldine may want to do that. Do you want to talk about that number?
Yeah, it's actually a lot of people have said 10 deaths in a million. It's not really 10 deaths. It's actually a level of significance, a threshold of significance that was established by the Air Quality Management District, and they view that when you do an analysis for health risk, and the model that we use actually looks at an exposure that an individual would have for a 70-year period under those conditions. You know, it's a conservative model because people don't stay in one spot for 70 years. And then AQMD considers 10 and lower than that really an insignificant level based on the type of model analysis that's done. So it's not cancer deaths, it's a cancer risk assessment.
But that's AQMD model.
Yes, they established that threshold of significance, and that's why we utilize that.
Just to add to Geraldine's comment, it is based on residential cancer risk, so it is just for residences.
70-year period.
Yeah, 70-year period.
So basically, just to restate it, if in a 70-year period a proposed project may have a threshold that exceeds an incidence of 10 or greater in a million risk of likelihood of falling prey to a cancer risk in 70 years, then that's considered significant and must be analyzed and discussed and determined as to what the impact might be or how it might be mitigated.
Correct. And again, it's a risk. It's a cancer risk for residential.
And we've just adopted what AQMD, in our cap, we've adopted what AQMD has set as a standard.
That is currently in the cap update, which has yet to be adopted, but we have accepted that threshold and have used it in many of our certified EIRs.
Yeah, actually, that's in the original cap.
It is in the original
we've used
cap.
that all along, and it's actually not part of the update. It's being carried over as the factor that we've used.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Just a comment, and I think it's important because I think there is a sense of frustration that people continue to come to these meetings. This process is important. I think it's valuable to have us and staff hear these comments and the development of the draft EIR and what's going to be present in those documents. So I sense there's frustration, but it's part of a process that I think is good, and as the chair said, the draft EIR will be coming out, and that will be where everybody will get a view of the result of a lot of discussion and work that has taken place over the series of years.
Is there any staff response?
Would you like me to respond to that? We are still considering that. The US EPA just held a public scoping meeting in September and released guidance on HIAs. I'm sorry, yes, an HIA. There is no accepted methodology currently in place. An HIA appears to primarily be focused on the NEPA side, which is the National Environmental Policy Act. We are not preparing a document under NEPA. We are not subject to NEPA. So there is a bit of an issue, if you will, with SCIG and ICTF in that we are only complying with CEQA at this time and preparing an environmental impact report for each of those projects. So we do not have a decision yet because we are looking for guidance from the US EPA. They are a federal agency, as well as federal agencies that would be subject to this analysis under their responsibilities for NEPA. So there is a lot of discussion that is occurring between both ports.
And are we seeking any other advice or analysis from other agencies or entities, public academic institutions or the like, which might have at least established some guidelines or framework or parameters for how an HIA might be considered? I basically said even for the one with the scoping request that EPA did, there still were not clear delineated guidelines as to how you would model or look at something. So the question is, are we scouring the university essentially to find out what or if or how there might be some standards that might be applicable and or acceptable for some kind of consideration?
Yes, we are. As part of the scoping meeting that was recently held, the US EPA followed up with a list of websites and other agencies or institutions that have used HIAs in previous analyses, and we have looked at those. We are going through quite an extensive review. The majority of them appear to be related to plans and policies. We have not yet really found one other than an Alaska oil field project that was specifically for an identified project that was established through the EIS process. I would say that the next likely project that is very close to us would be the I-710 corridor project. And there is discussions going on too about whether or not that is a standalone analysis outside of the EIR-EIS document that has also not yet been decided upon. So there's really no firm example with an established methodology protocol that has been vetted through an agency at this time.
And where is the 710 freeway project analysis vis-a-vis these rail projects relative to timing and EIRs?
The timing, I do not know when that draft EIR-EIS is expected to be released. It's still
next spring, so
currently
somewhat similar.
Next spring.
There was an error in what you just said, if I may.
Yeah.
The project committee for the I-710 has voted 2 times that there will be a health impact assessment for the 710 and that it will be part of the EIR. So that's clear. It's no longer up for grabs, except that the Gateway Council of Governments would much prefer that that not happen. But the elected officials who are part of the project committee have voted 2 times now that it is to happen and it is to be part of the EIR.
Okay, thank you for that.
I appreciate that. We obviously need to coordinate with whatever the latest capable, applicable measure might be that we would likely have to consider.
And we're talking about computer sheets,
Well, we also need to know what some guidelines are. You don't just require it out of thin air. You need to know what the standards are, who sets the standards, and what's acceptable as standards. I think that's what the staff is looking to review. Any other comments or questions? If not, I think a motion to adjourn is in order.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. There we go. We are adjourned.